Good afternoon, Lions Nation. I hope you're all doing well. We're getting closer and closer to training camp, and in my opinion, this is one of the most important moments of the entire offseason. Why? Because even before the first practice begins, we're already seeing several major developments that reveal exactly where this Detroit Lions team is headed. When you put all of these stories together, a much bigger picture starts to emerge. There are plenty of reasons for this fan base to feel excited and confident about what this team can accomplish, but at the same time, there are a few situations that deserve our full attention. Personally, I believe these next few weeks could shape the direction of the entire season, and some of the latest news gives us a very good idea of what Dan Campbell and this organization have been preparing behind the scenes. One of the biggest stories involves the situation surrounding Terrion Arnold. According to reports, 4 NFL teams, the Houston Texans, New York Jets, Indianapolis Colts, and Seattle Seahawks, have reportedly shown interest by monitoring his situation. However, that should not be confused with teams actively trying to sign him immediately. The reality is much more complicated. As long as the legal process remains unresolved, there is significant uncertainty surrounding his future. Any organization would naturally hesitate before making a commitment without knowing the final outcome. From the Lions' perspective, moving on was viewed as the correct football decision because keeping that situation around the team would have created constant distractions throughout training camp. Every press conference would have included questions about Arnold instead of focusing on football, player development, and preparing for the season. Whether fans agree with the decision or not, the organization appears determined to keep the attention entirely on the players currently inside the building. As training camp approaches, the Lions want every conversation centered on competition, roster battles, player health, and building chemistry instead of off-field headlines. That mindset alone tells you a lot about how seriously this coaching staff approaches preparation. Speaking of preparation, there was another encouraging update involving Kerby Joseph. One of the biggest concerns for Detroit this offseason has been the health of several defensive starters, but the latest news offers some positive momentum. Kerby Joseph is reportedly not expected to undergo knee surgery before training camp. Even more encouraging, he recently shared a video showing himself dancing, something that naturally gives fans hope that his knee may be progressing better than initially feared. Of course, nobody should jump to conclusions because the real evaluation will happen once training camp begins, but every positive sign matters when you're talking about one of the most important players in Detroit's secondary. And that's really becoming the overall theme surrounding the Lions injury situation right now. Instead of hearing about new setbacks, the updates have generally been moving in the right direction. There are still questions that will only be answered once players return to full football activities, but there is growing optimism that Detroit could enter camp healthier than many expected. The team is also expected to gain a much clearer picture regarding Brian Branch and several other injured players once practices officially begin. Sam LaPorta is also expected to be ready, although everyone will be watching closely to confirm that once camp opens. For a team that has dealt with injury issues over the past couple of seasons, simply entering camp with relatively positive medical updates is already a major storyline. Staying healthy throughout the season has become one of the biggest goals for this roster because everyone understands how quickly injuries can completely change expectations in the NFL. Another fascinating storyline involves Detroit's offensive line, particularly the competition at left guard. While many fans automatically assume Christian Mahogany has the inside track, there are growing indications that Ben Bart will provide legitimate competition once he is fully healthy. Dan Campbell has spoken positively about Bart during OTAs and minicamp, and whenever Campbell consistently mentions a player, it's usually worth paying attention. But perhaps the biggest reason Lions fans should feel confident isn't necessarily about who wins the job. It's about the depth behind the starters. That appears to be one of the biggest improvements compared to previous seasons. No matter who ultimately earns the starting position, Detroit believes the backup options are significantly stronger than they were a year ago. That depth extends across the offensive line. Larry Borom provides experienced tackle depth, while Juice Scruggs gives Detroit another reliable option at center if necessary. Miles Frazier also adds flexibility along the interior. Instead of one injury creating a major crisis, the Lions now appear much better equipped to absorb short-term losses without watching the entire offense collapse. That's exactly the type of roster construction championship contenders try to build. The quarterback situation behind Jared Goff is also becoming one of the more intriguing battles heading into camp. At this point, there have been no major additions, and it appears Detroit is comfortable evaluating the quarterbacks already on the roster before making any further decisions. That means training camp will likely determine how the depth chart develops. The competition between Teddy Bridgewater and rookie Luke Altmaier could quietly become one of the most interesting position battles to follow. Bridgewater brings years of NFL experience and understands exactly what it means to serve as a veteran backup. His knowledge, leadership, and ability to help Jared Goff prepare each week are obvious advantages. On the other hand, Luke Altmaier represents the unknown upside. Reports continue praising not only his physical tools, but also his ability to quickly process information mentally. Coaches reportedly believe the game isn't overwhelming him, and that's often one of the biggest indicators for young quarterbacks entering the league. While nobody is suggesting he should challenge Jared Goff, developing a young, inexpensive backup with long-term potential would certainly benefit Detroit's future roster construction. As all of these storylines continue developing simultaneously, one thing becomes increasingly clear. Training camp is going to answer a lot of important questions. The health of key defenders, the offensive line competitions, the backup quarterback battle, and the overall readiness of this roster will soon move from offseason discussion to on-field reality. And based on everything we've learned so far, there are already several reasons for Lions fans to pay very close attention. Do you think these early developments are giving the Lions the foundation for a stronger season, or is there still one major concern that worries you the most heading into training camp? But beyond the health updates and the roster competitions, there is another conversation that has started gaining momentum among Lions fans, and it centers around whether Detroit actually improved this offseason or whether expectations have become too optimistic. It's a fair debate because when you compare this roster to last season, there are changes almost everywhere. Some fans remain skeptical, while others believe this team is positioned to take another significant step forward. If you start with the offense, the overall belief inside Detroit is that this unit should be even stronger than it was a year ago. Jared Goff remains the starting quarterback, bringing continuity to the position that every successful franchise values. Stability under center is something many NFL teams spend years searching for, and the Lions already have it. Where the biggest optimism comes from is the offensive line. Last season, protecting Goff became an issue at several points, and whenever the offensive line struggled, the offense naturally became less explosive. This offseason, however, there is genuine confidence that Detroit has addressed those concerns. The expectation is that Blake Miller strengthens the tackle position, Penei Sewell shifts into his new role, Cade Mays anchors the middle of the line, and the overall chemistry across the unit continues improving as the season progresses. Just as important as the starters is the depth behind them. One injury no longer feels like it would completely derail the offensive front. Instead of relying on inexperienced replacements, Detroit now has multiple backup linemen capable of stepping into meaningful snaps without creating a dramatic drop in performance. That type of roster depth often separates playoff teams from true contenders once injuries inevitably begin piling up throughout the season. The running back room also enters training camp with tremendous expectations. With Jahmyr Gibbs expected to become the primary ball carrier, many believe his production could reach another level entirely. There is confidence that his workload will increase significantly compared to previous seasons, allowing him to impact games both on the ground and through the passing attack. His versatility may become one of the biggest weapons in Detroit's offense. Every time he touches the football, defenses are forced to account for both his speed and his ability to create explosive plays in space. If the offensive line performs the way many expect, Gibbs could find himself operating behind one of the league's strongest blocking units. Behind him, Isaiah Pacheco gives Detroit another reliable option capable of handling meaningful carries when needed. Instead of placing the entire workload on one player, the Lions still possess enough depth in the backfield to maintain physicality throughout an entire season. The receiving group also appears positioned to take another step forward. Amon-Ra St. Brown continues to provide consistency as one of the league's most dependable targets. Jameson Williams remains one of the most dangerous vertical threats on the roster, but perhaps the most intriguing name being discussed is Isaac Tesla. Although his opportunities were limited last season, there is growing confidence that his role could expand considerably. Reports from off-season practices indicate noticeable improvement in both his route running and his releases off the line of scrimmage. Coaches have reportedly been encouraged by his development throughout OTAs and minicamp, creating the possibility that Detroit could feature him much more frequently this year. If that happens, returns, the Lions may have an even deeper receiving rotation than they did a season ago, giving opposing defenses one more player they must account for every single week. Then there's the tight end room, which quietly looks much stronger than before. Sam LaPorta is expected to be healthy entering training camp, Brock Wright returns, Tyler Conklin provides another experienced option, and Jackson Meeks adds additional depth behind them. Compare that to stretches of last season when injuries forced Detroit to rely much deeper on the depth chart, and it's easy to understand why there's optimism surrounding this position group. Taken together, many inside the organization believe the offense has upgraded across multiple positions without needing dramatic changes at quarterback or wide receiver. Instead, the improvements come from stronger protection, healthier personnel, increased depth, and players entering another year of development within the system. The defensive outlook, however, is a bit more complicated. Along the defensive line, there are reasons to be encouraged. A fully healthy Aiden Hutchinson immediately changes the ceiling of the entire unit. His return alone gives Detroit one of the NFL's premier pass rushers back on the field, something the defense desperately missed. Alongside Hutchinson, Derek Moore enters the picture as one of the most exciting young additions. While expecting double-digit sacks immediately would be unrealistic, there is real belief that he can become an important rotational contributor early in his career. His long-term potential paired with Hutchinson gives Detroit an exciting foundation for the future. Inside, Aleem McNeil returning healthy also carries enormous importance. Combined with Tyreek Williams entering his second season, Detroit hopes the interior defensive line becomes much more disruptive than it was